Okay, so now we're going to be talking about Congress. And I'm going to start off with some of the basic facts about Congress, just so we're all on the same page, and then we'll get into the more sort of what I think at least are the more interesting things about Congress that's helpful for a citizen to know. The first thing is that remember that when we're talking about Congress, if you look at the first thing on the lecture notes, it says that it says the word bicameral. Bicameral just means two houses. Like there's unicameral, which means one house, and then bicameral, which means two houses. What that means is that our Congress is a bicameral Congress, a bicameral legislature, meaning two houses, two separate institutions or houses make up Congress. We have the House of Representatives and we have the Senate. And those two things together make up Congress. So when we talk about Congress, we're talking about both the House and the Senate. Now, sometimes that can get a little bit confusing because if you listen on the news sometimes or hear people speak, they'll talk about a congressman, somebody who's a congressman. Well, as it turns out, congressman is a word that people use to describe somebody who's in the House of Representatives. If they're talking about somebody in the Senate, they refer to them as a senator. So congressmen refer to the House, senators refer to the Senate. So keep that, don't let that confuse you if you're watching TV and you hear congressman. Now, in the House of Representatives, let's talk about the House of Representatives. First, in terms of the organization, there are 435 members of the House of Representatives. Each member represents a congressional district. That's what it's called. They represent a congressional district. For example, Buck McKeon is the representative who represents the Santa Clarita Valley in the House of Representatives. Okay, so there are 435 members. Each member represents one congressional district. Each member of the House of Representatives serves for 2 years. So if somebody gets elected in 2012, then that means that in 2014, 2 years later, they're going to be up for re-election. In other words, they're going to have to run again if they want to stay in the House of Representatives. Then in 2016, they have to run again. And then 2018. So they have to run every 2 years. So when they get elected, they serve for 2 years. And then if they want to stay, they have to run for re-election to stay longer. And there are some people who run for re-election over and over again. There are some people who've served in the House for 30 and 40 years. Really long amounts of time, meaning that they've won 15 or 20 elections in a row. And which follows to the next point, there are no term limits. You can run for the House of Representatives as many times as you want. There's no limit. As long as people will vote you back in, you can stay. Now, the representation in the House of Representatives is based on what we call proportional representation. Now, we've talked about this earlier when we talked about the Constitution. Proportional representation just means that representation is based on population. The more people a state has, or the larger the population a state has, the more representatives they get. This was all that part. Remember, we talked about the 3/5 compromise way back a long time ago. The 3/5 compromise was all about how are we going to count the population, right? The South wanted to count slaves as a full person. The North didn't want to. It's all about population because it was all about how many representatives does each state get in the House of Representatives. So, for example, California has 53 representatives. 53 representatives in the House of Representatives. Wyoming, 1. They have 1 representative. For the entire state of Wyoming, they have 1 representative. For California, we have 53 people who are representing us in the House of Representatives. Wyoming has 1. Now, here's something to keep in mind, though. Each member of Congress represents approximately the same population, the same number of people. And if you go ahead, and what I want you to do is, assuming that you're doing this on your computer and you have access to my notes, I want you to click on the link that says each MC represents approximately same population. You can just go ahead and pause me and go ahead and pull that up so you're looking at the map that I'm going to be talking about. So just go ahead and pause me, hit the pause button wherever it is, hit pause, and go get that. Okay, I'm going to assume you have the map up. If you look at the map, and if you see me looking over in this direction, because I have the map right there, okay. But if you look at the map, what you'll see is that there's the large area that's in blue, and you can see that there's like a bold 3 in the middle of it. That is the 3rd Congressional District. That's called the 3rd Congressional District. This is Nebraska that we're looking at, by the way. So that's Nebraska. Then if you look at sort of the area to the right, that's the 1st Congressional District. It has the 1 in it, and you can see it's kind of a lavender color. That's the 1st Congressional District. And then if you look to the right of that, where the word Omaha is, it's kind of like in light blue, there's a number 2. That's the 2nd Congressional District. So Wyoming has 1 representative, right, for the whole state. Nebraska has 3 representatives for the whole state. Still much smaller than what California has. Now the reason, so the first thing you should notice about these congressional districts, they're not at all the same size. Right? Congressional District number 3 is way bigger than Congressional District number 2. Well, the reason why is in Congressional District 3, the population is very sparse. All they do in that area, they grow corn. So what you have there is all kinds of corn and a few people, right? And so, but when you add up all those people, it equals a certain amount. I don't know exactly what the amount is. It's around 700,000 people, right? But so, but there's a whole bunch of space for growing corn, and mostly, you know, that's what's there, except there's people there as well. Congressional District 1, now they have, it's smaller. Well, part of the reason it's smaller is if you look and you see on there, you'll see the word Lincoln. That's the capital. Is that yeah, that's the capital of Nebraska. So there's a lot of people living there, so there's a large population there, which is why that's even smaller. And then, so there's the same number of people in Congressional District 1 as there are in Congressional District 3. Then if you go ahead and you look at Congressional District number 2, that's where Omaha is. Omaha is the biggest city in Nebraska. And so the population of that little tiny area is the same as Congressional District 1 and Congressional District number 3. Now the reason it's set up like this is that this is true for every state, right? So whoever, Buck McKeon represents just around the same number of people as the representatives from Congressional District 3, 1, and 2 in Nebraska. So nobody in the House of Representatives can claim that they represent more Americans. They're all equal. They all represent more or less the same number of people, right? So but it's not exact. It's not exact. It's close to it. They get as close as they can, but it's not perfectly exact. But more or less, everybody represents the same number of people. Now, there are certain powers that are unique to the House of Representatives. So I want to go over each of those, and then we'll move on to the Senate. First, all bills that involve spending money in any way, where the government is going to be spending money on some sort of program, they have to be passed in the House of Representatives first. They have to pass it, and then it can go to the Senate. It can go to the other institution. But it has to start in the House of Representatives. And the framers did it this way on purpose. They refer to the House of Representatives as the People's House. This is where most of the representatives are. And so they wanted it to be that if the federal government was going to spend money, the people who were the representatives who were closest to the people, the members of the House of Representatives, they were going to agree to it first and foremost. And then it has to go to the Senate. Now, every once in a while, what will happen is the Senate will pass a bill that involves spending. And then they'll pass it and they'll give it to the House. And what will happen is the House gets the bill and they go, that's not the rule. We have to pass this first. And they'll send the bill back to the Senate. It's called a blue slip. Like, sorry, we passed the bills first here that spend money. All spending bills that involve spending money have to pass the House first. The second power that is unique to the House of Representatives is that in a presidential election, if no candidate gets a majority of electoral votes, then the House of Representatives selects the president. So let's say we have an election and there's a third party. There's a third party that gets some electoral votes. So neither the Democrat or the Republican get a majority. You need 270 electoral votes to get a majority. Suppose somebody gets 260, somebody gets 250, and somebody gets the rest of them. Some other party gets the rest of them. Well, you need to get a majority to win. And so in that case, what would happen is the decision would be made in the House of Representatives. When the House of Representatives is picking the president, each state gets one vote. So California gets one vote, Wyoming gets one vote, Nebraska gets one vote. And if you recall when we talked about the Constitution way back then, this is one of the reasons that the House of Representatives felt like signed on to being part of the Constitution, because they figured it was going to be very hard for anyone to ever get a majority of electoral votes. They weren't planning on political parties developing. So in any case, it doesn't happen very often that the House chooses our president, but it does happen, and it has happened in the past. So if no presidential candidate gets a majority of electoral votes, which right now is 270, then that means that the decision is made in the House of Representatives and each state gets one vote. The last thing, members of Congress in the House of Representatives, another unique power that the House of Representatives has, is they have the ability to impeach somebody, presidents, judges. And now it's important to keep in mind what an impeachment is. President Clinton was impeached, right? He wasn't removed from office, right? He was impeached, but he wasn't removed. People oftentimes think impeachment and removal are the same things. All an impeachment is the House of Representatives going ahead and saying, we believe there's enough evidence to hold a trial. We think this president or this judge has done something so bad that we believe that he should be brought to trial, right? And that's what an impeachment is. In the courts, it's called an indictment. An indictment, like if you have enough evidence to go ahead and throw someone in jail or to charge them with a crime, that's an indictment. Well, in politics, it's called an impeachment. It's just the House of Representatives saying, we believe there's enough evidence to hold a trial to see whether or not the president or a judge should be removed from office. All it takes to impeach somebody is a simple majority. And a simple majority just means that you have a majority plus one. One more than a majority, and somebody is impeached. So President Clinton was impeached. Andrew Johnson was actually impeached. Neither one of them were removed from office. So there are three powers that are unique to the House of Representatives. Any bill that involves spending has to begin in the House of Representatives. If no presidential candidate gets a majority of electoral votes, if no candidate gets a majority, the House decides and each state gets one vote. Lastly, the House of Representatives has the ability to impeach a president. But again, impeachment does not mean removal. Impeachment simply means that they have the ability to go ahead and determine whether there's enough evidence to hold a trial. Now we'll move on to the Senate.